Volkswagen have just lost second place in global electric car sales. In fact, not only have they lost second place, they're actually in danger of dropping to fourth place very soon. And their sales of vehicles globally are falling drastically. Volkswagen, my friends, whether you want to believe it or not, is actually in significant trouble right now. And honestly, some of their competitors are going to swamp them potentially by the end of this year. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm the Electric Viking. Great to have you here. Big shout out, big thank you to all of you who have subscribed to my sons, Jack and Cal. They're 5, Jack's 8, Cal is 5 to their channel. Awesome to have you all. I really appreciate some of the really awesome, inspiring, positive comments you've left on their channel. They mean a lot to me and the boys. Thanks so much for doing that. And thank you to our Patreon supporters on the channel. You really help this channel to exist. And I've got to say a big thank you to you, all of you, from the bottom of my heart. I mean that. Volkswagen this month, well, let's just get straight to it. They sold about 100,000 electric cars. Well, technically, they're like everyone else. They've got the excuses, right? The excuse is we have an order backlog of, I think they said 400,000. Whether that's true or not, I think it's probably true. The reality is, so does everyone. If you can provide 400,000 EVs, then, well, there's a captive audience waiting to buy them right now in China, in Europe, in the US. There's more than 2 million pre-orders for electric vehicles in the US. There would be a lot more than that if companies like Ford hadn't have stopped pre-orders for the F-150 electric pickup truck in December. The same thing is happening for many automakers. They're just pausing pre-orders in order to limit expectation, in order to, not have an experience where you put a pre-order in now and you've got to wait 7 years to get your car. So Volkswagen's, saying we have, it's all good, it's all okay, we have 400,000 pre-orders means nothing, because if you can't deliver, well, that's what matters. Right now, Legacy Auto are not delivering when it comes to EVs. For example, GM sold just over 400,000, well, didn't sell, but actually delivered just over 400 EVs in the US in the first quarter of the year. That, my friends, is a pretty pathetic number. Hopefully for General Motors, by the end of this year, the company is looking entirely different. Now, if you want to say to yourself, well, Volkswagen are beating General Motors. Well, is that even true? 28% of all Volkswagen EVs delivered in the first quarter of this year, so about 28,000 of them, were sold in China. And, well, of those 28,000, Volkswagen owns around about 50%. So it would then be fair, if we're going to include Volkswagen's joint venture vehicle deliveries and sales in China, to include General Motors as well. How many EVs did General Motors sell in China? Well, they sold nearly 100,000. In other words, General Motors and Volkswagen, if you want to include their sales in China, which is what we're doing here to get this 100,000 figure for Volkswagen, otherwise they would have been way below that 100,000. They would have been down at 73,000. Then GM and Volkswagen are actually delivering similar numbers globally, which is insane if you think, well, on the face of it, the news media are saying GM only delivered 450 EVs in the first quarter, which isn't really true. So what exactly is going on? Well, BYD, they delivered 145,000 EVs in the first quarter of this year. Now, that 145,000 is actually much more impressive on the face of it than what it sounds, because BYD doesn't have joint ventures for those numbers. To get those numbers, BYD doesn't need to partner up with FAW or SAIC or anyone else in China. They fully own all their electric vehicle deliveries, well, 99% of them anyway. Therefore, the reality is BYD is actually way ahead of Volkswagen, and the tally is not even remotely close. In addition to that, the first quarter for BYD is always really, really poor. Now, in the West, auto sales they're lower in the first quarter of the year, but not massively lower. In China, on the other hand, well, the country goes into snooze mode for the first quarter of the year, especially January and February, where auto sales deliveries are just minuscule in comparison to what they are at the end of the year. The difference is bigger in China if you're comparing the first quarter to the successive quarters of the year compared to what it is in the rest of the world. That means BYD are actually way ahead of Volkswagen right now. And in fact, I believe those numbers will dramatically accelerate this year. If you have a think about it, it makes total sense. Why? Because Volkswagen's saying, yeah, it's all going to be okay. We're going to make more EVs later on. BYD is saying, you know what? Nothing. They're saying nothing. You know why? Because they have numerous car factories, numerous battery factories opening by the end of this year. When is Volkswagen opening their massive EV plant? End of 2025, 4 years from now. BYD, when is their gigafactory opening? Battery gigafactory and car gigafactory? Before the end of this year. In fact, some of them are opening in the middle of this year. And BYD is building out factories, believe it or not, quicker than Volkswagen. Much, much, much quicker. It's announcing them at a rapid fire rate. They built 6 factories last year. Volkswagen has no hope of competing with BYD based on just that. But if you include the fact that Volkswagen got it all wrong, I'm sorry, they got it all wrong. So did Legacy Auto. Why is that? Well, a Western think tank has just shown, not just a think tank, but a company who actually researches what has been ordered over the last 2 years and what has been built over the last 2 years, and then shows you what will happen over the next 5 years based on what has been made over the previous 2 and based on the actual announcements made for developments and building of the next 5 years, says that, right? What I've been saying for a long time now. Lithium iron phosphate batteries will dominate the world battery market by 2026. They will own more than 65% of the world battery market by 2026. What does that mean for Volkswagen? Well, it means that it's going to be very, very hard for Volkswagen to compete with BYD. Who are their competitors? Volkswagen says their competitors are who exactly, right? Where do 50% of Volkswagen's profits come from? China, right? Who are they really competing with? It's China. Even Herbert Diess said that himself, right? What is Volkswagen going to do when all of its competitors can put batteries in their cars that cost 50% less, approximately 50% less than batteries that Volkswagen is using? Volkswagen have no competitive advantage in China. They will probably lose around about 70% of their market in China. That's already happening this year. Have a look at the sales numbers. It's already happening now. They're losing sales, not only in China, but worldwide. My friends, unfortunately, the reality is the largest legacy automaker in terms of EVs, by far the largest, has a pretty good chance of going bankrupt by 2030, or at least needing tens of billions of dollars of stimulus from the German government. It is absolutely guaranteed that without that, they will cease to exist. Why do I say this? It's not just BYD. It's not just Tesla coming. It's a range of different Chinese automakers. More than 10 Chinese automakers will deliver over 100,000 EVs in China alone this year. BYD will deliver over 1 million EVs this year in China. Tesla, of course, we all know what they're doing, 320,000 deliveries in the first quarter this year. And the reality is, if we look at the sales numbers right now, if we look at what Legacy Auto is doing, if we look at the fact that these Chinese automakers are made the smart decision to use lithium iron phosphate batteries, then we can see that Legacy Auto, well, they have a huge handicap. And when I say huge, I mean it's gargantuan, because Chinese automakers can manufacture a car for less money without having to have a battery that costs 50% less as well. Now, I think consumers will figure out within the next few years that it's unwise to buy an EV with a lithium ternary battery when you can get another EV, right, from a rival brand for less money using a better battery. When I say a better battery, well, it's inevitable that people will say lithium iron phosphate batteries are better because right now their energy density is lower. That's the only disadvantage they have. By the end of this year, energy density will be comparable. There will be no advantage to buying a car with a lithium ternary battery. On the face of it, the only logical conclusion is Volkswagen are currently losing ground to Tesla, right? They're losing ground to BYD. They're losing ground to XPeng. What are they going to do, right? What are they going to do to change that? Have a new factory come online in the end of 2025? Is that the solution that they're after? Which, by the way, will be using lithium ternary batteries, not LFP? Yeah, clearly they are in significant trouble right now. Now, Tesla achieved another quarterly record of electric car deliveries, 310,048. That's a huge result compared to Volkswagen in particular, also compared to other legacy automakers, but Volkswagen's deliveries were 100,000. In other words, Tesla has widened the gap between Volkswagen and themselves. All the naysayers, what have they been saying for the last 2 years on all the forums everywhere? Blurting it out. Everywhere you go, people are saying Volkswagen is going to crush Tesla, right? Volkswagen is going to crush Tesla. Instead, the gap between their electric car sales is actually widening, not closing, as all these people have predicted. Now, why do I say this? Well, the Volkswagen Group was seen by the legacy auto lovers as a company that will be able to quickly scale up battery electric car sales of multiple brands and overtake Tesla almost within a matter of 12 months, making Tesla obsolete. Well, the company is struggling. But to be fair, legacy auto have been using excuses now constantly for more than 2 years. It's not just Volkswagen making excuses, but Volkswagen's latest excuses are they have semiconductor shortages and more recently, wire harnesses supply issues. So due to these constraints, Volkswagen's electric vehicle sales have grown year over year, a lot slower than Tesla's and are lower this quarter than in the previous 3 quarters. But I thought Volkswagen was ramping up. What happened to that? As a result of this situation, right, the gap has never been bigger. It's now 210,000 units over the last quarter. And this is in a point in which Tesla is about to ramp up massively in China, massively in Berlin, massively in Texas. This gap will only continue to widen. It's the only possible scenario. Now, BYD has increased their electric car sales very, very quickly by 271% year over year to 143,224 in the first quarter of this year. That is quite a lot more than the Volkswagen Group, especially when you consider that of those 100,000, like I said before, that Volkswagen delivered in the first quarter of this year, 28,000 was sold in China and built not by Volkswagen, but by their joint partners. But clearly, Volkswagen is no longer the second largest electric vehicle manufacturer on the face of the earth. In fact, they are in significant danger of being overtaken. Who by? General Motors. General Motors, who own 40% of the joint venture between themselves and SAIC and Wuling, delivered 95,000 Wuling Hongwan Mini EVs. Now you might be saying, well, that's just a quadricycle. It doesn't matter. It's just a small car. They can't make much profit off that. They can't make much profit off that. You're right. They don't. They only make about $1,500 profit per vehicle sold. We know that because that information has been disclosed to us by those companies. Unlike Volkswagen, where we don't know if they make a single dollar off EVs. In fact, it's reported that they actually make a loss off every single EV they sell. That may or may not be true. We don't know. The point is, we don't know. We do know General Motors makes a profit from every single Wuling Hongwan Mini EV they sell. And although that profit is small, it's a lot better than making a loss. As you can see, I've made some predictions on what would happen. And boy, oh boy, was I wrong. I predicted that Volkswagen would be equal second with BYD in 2030 for vehicle deliveries. That was totally wrong. I could not have been more wrong. You look at what's happening now, you look at what's going to happen in the future. Clearly, BYD will outshine Volkswagen by an order of magnitude. It will not be even close. BYD clearly will become the second largest manufacturer of vehicles on the face of the earth. Tesla will be in first. The only question will be who will be in third. Clearly, it will no longer be Volkswagen. I don't know who it's going to be, though. Fascinating to see who it is. Clearly, whoever it is, though, has to be using lithium iron phosphate batteries. That is the only battery chemistry type that any car maker will be able to mass produce in the numbers needed to make the millions of EVs to place third on this list of global automotive car makers. So the question is, who will that be? I honestly don't know, but I want to know who you think it might be in the comment section below. Did Toyota have the capacity to do it? Absolutely not. They don't even plan on doing it. They only plan on having maybe 2 million max EVs by 2030 to sell. What about General Motors? Well, General Motors plan on only having 50% or less of their vehicles be EVs in 2030. That pretty much rules them out. What about Ford? Well, Ford had the choice to use lithium iron phosphate batteries in their Mustang Mach-E in China. They chose not to do so, and instead they used BYD's ternary batteries. And in addition to that, in the US, their joint venture partner, SK Innovation, also specializes in manufacturing lithium ternary batteries. So I don't think it'll be Ford either. If I'm being truly realistic, it's more than likely going to be another Chinese electric car company. The question is who and when. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.